The universe cannot be infinitely old. Nothing physical can exist for all of eternity. It's science. Science says highest entropy, lowest energy, things fall apart, things break, things run down. There's even talk of the eventual heat death of the universe and so on. So things wear out, things run down. So if the universe didn't have a beginning, then it's always been infinitely old. Okay, I'll give you a second to think about that. If you didn't have a beginning, you're always infinitely old. You've always been infinitely old. You will always be infinitely old. If you don't have a beginning and you can just keep going backwards through time, well, you're infinitely old. There's no beginning, you're infinitely old. So the universe had a beginning. And the only thing that seems logical to me, since the universe is sort of defined in terms of matter, time, and energy, that there had to be a point when none of that existed. And so the reason I believe God created the universe is, one, it had to have been created, and two, it had to be created by someone that existed outside of time, matter, and energy, outside of physical, a non-physical being. And that's the only thing that really fits. Time, matter, and energy could not create time, matter, and energy. It would have already existed, you know. For me to create anything, I would have to already exist. So I could not create me. If I already existed, I would have no need to create me if I already existed. So something outside of time, matter, and energy created time, matter, and energy. It's the only thing that's logical. So the universe had a beginning. Whoever created the universe had to exist outside of it, outside of those things that science defines as, you know, what makes up the universe, time, matter, and energy. So to me, God fits all that. God has always existed, so exists outside of time, perfect, because, well, if you're flawed, you don't exist for all of eternity. Not physical, because again, that would make him part of the universe, and then he couldn't have created the universe if he was part of it in the first place. So the only thing that fits is, you know, God. That we're imperfect seems basically self-evident. It's totally obvious. I mean, take a look. That God created us as children to be his own children rather than just servants or slaves or whatever, fits. That he's perfect and we're imperfect. That he wants a relationship with us enough that as a human being, God died to pay the penalty, I guess you would say, for our sin, just to have that relationship with us. See, he could have created mindless robots forced to do his bidding, but he didn't want to create mindless robots with no free will. He wanted us to be able to choose him or reject him. But he also knew, before he created us, before the universe existed, he knew that as free-willed beings, that some would accept and some would reject. And that rejection, that disobedience, that I'll do it myself, I'll go my own way, I'll do my own thing, I'm in charge of me kind of attitude would have consequences. And that he would eventually, as a human being, have to sacrifice himself. Now we want to keep in mind that Jesus was fully God and fully human. And it's a hard concept, I think, for some, because nobody else has ever been both God and human. We're just human, period. The end. But Jesus, who was God born as a man, who always existed, sacrificed himself willingly, on purpose, to bridge that gap between us, so that we would have a way to be with him for all of eternity. Our sinful nature says we're separate from God. God as a man, in the form of Jesus, became a sacrifice. And this fits. I think in Islam, if I'm not mistaken, and I apologize if I am, but in the Quran, I think it basically says to make subjects of your enemies, to basically force them to, believe what you believe, or otherwise, if they don't, kill them. That doesn't fit in my mind to who God is, or who, not just who I would want God to be, but given our free will, that he would tell us then to force all others to follow him, and if they don't, kill them. That doesn't fit in my mind. So that's why I believe Christianity and not Islam or other religions. I don't see God as like this general who's moving these armies against these armies and those kinds of things. That's not who I see God as being, and it doesn't fit with my understanding of history. Yes, God has had to choose sides, I know. But we're the ones warring with each other. It isn't God directing us to, if he wanted that group wiped out, he could just wipe them out. If he wanted this group wiped out, he could just wipe them out. He knows that we will struggle as a race. And there are times that he's chosen a side. Whether that was through the requests or who the conflict involved or whatever, I don't know, and it's not relevant at this point. But God's not up there pitting us against each other for sport as some sort of game. That's not who I see God as being. Not a loving God. And if you look around, sure, we think the child within us thinks, well, if God loved us, life would be perfect. I mean, why wouldn't it be? I mean, if he loved us and he could do it, I mean, why wouldn't he? Well, if you watch the first part of this, then you know why he wouldn't. We learn appreciation. We learn dependence. We would not understand. Our understanding of life would be so limited if we didn't understand the painful things. If we didn't know thirst, how would we know how remarkable a cold glass of tea, sweet tea, with maybe just a hint of lemon? It's sad to me that people are so caught up in this. Life doesn't work the way I think it should, and so God can't be real. Life works exactly the way God laid it out. For us to have free will, he couldn't, he chooses the way he shows his power. He doesn't do it the way we want him to. I mean, I want him to float down through the clouds, come down to the planet and break the earth in half and say, okay, do you believe me now? But that takes away our free will. We're not able to choose. Well, I guess there's some that would still say, oh no, I don't believe. Because that's who we are. He can't force us to believe in him. He could. I'm not saying he can't. I'm saying he would not choose to. Because he wanted us to choose him of our own free will. And that's why, it's like, if God gave me everything I asked for, then it would be pretty obvious that he was there. If I said, oh, Lord, I really need $1 million. Oh, there it is. Thanks. I appreciate that. Doesn't that kind of prove his existence? And as I've said, God knows better than we do. We think we do. And we're so petulant little children that we cry and we whine. God didn't make my life perfect, so he doesn't exist. No, well, bzz, wrong. If our lives were perfect, we wouldn't need God in the first place. He might not show himself in all his power to us, but that doesn't mean he can't encourage us. And I think knowing we're limited, knowing we only have so much time on the planet, I think that is, in some real way, God's way of encouraging us to develop a relationship with him. He's not going to force us, but that doesn't mean he can't, nudge us in the right direction. But see, the thing we have to keep in mind is that God knew from the beginning who would accept, who would reject. And he loved us so much, even knowing that there were those that would reject him and would have to spend eternity separated from him because of their own decision, their own choice. He created us anyway because He wanted so much to have that relationship with us. And so all these things, everything you hear in the Bible fits in ways that when you start looking around the world, just makes a whole lot more sense. A loving Father, not a tyrannical God, flame shooting out his eyes. Well, I think there probably is some description in Revelation about flames, and but that he's perfect and we're imperfect. That there is a reason that we're physical and finite and have pain. That we don't know what's best for us, and that God does. And all of these things fit together so perfectly when you start looking at them that way. But if you just say, well, God's all-powerful and my life isn't perfect, I can't believe in God because of that. Well, that's limited. To say that all the universe, that everything can be summarized in terms of matter, time, and energy, and that nothing outside of that can possibly exist, is limited. It's, they say Christians should be more open-minded. We believe in things outside of the physical universe. How can you possibly be more open-minded than that? It's scientists that say everything has to be defined in this time, matter, energy paradigm, or whatever the right term is. That's limited. Expand your thoughts here a little. Could the universe have magically exploded into existence by itself? No. Does a perfect, all-powerful being creating the universe actually make sense? Yeah. That he loved us enough to do this for us and to actually die so that we could have a relationship? That makes sense. These other things, they don't make sense. If you look around the world, you see the incredible beauty that's out there, and you can't know from that there's a God. You think this is random? You look at pictures from the Webb Space Telescope or Hubble or whatever, and you say this just happened? That's ridiculous. That's just ridiculous. The God that exists is the one described in the Bible. And I beg you to give that real thought.